Google, because I Googled it, who is Jack Sprat? It's a nursery rhyme or some kind of little kid's rhyme.
Right.
Jack Sprat could eat no fat. And then it got something else. I don't know. Don't care. But I was uh, I was a little bit intrigued by it. All right. Where's Mr. Edelman, Ms. Wentland? Have you all discussed the fact that we cannot have a hearing today?
I found that out at 4:20 on Friday, Judge.
Okie dokie. So, uh, what's the case number, Patricia?
The case number is 560-941.
All right. The court will come to order. We call case number 560941, State of Texas versus Michael Leonard Spratt. All right. State is not ready. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
All right. Defense.
Defense is ready, Judge.
All right. And what says the state?
State requests the court to recall this case for at least tomorrow. The officer Prescott is in Fredericksburg, Texas, with his wife and daughter on a vacation that they had planned for at least the last 3 weeks. Considering that on multiple occasions there have been resets for this case requested by the defense for multiple reasons, we don't think it's asking too much for the court to extend to Officer Prescott this small courtesy.
Well, my understanding is that the state and the San Antonio Police Association have some kind of an agreement that you do not subpoena them. Is that correct?
We request them.
Okay, so there's no subpoena. We can't legally attach him for not showing up, which I have already made my feelings known about that. All right. So, Ms. Wetland, what says defense?
So, Your Honor, I can't look at the file jacket right now, but I can tell the court this. When the prosecutor is indicating that there have been multiple resets at the defense request, I don't believe that they've been, I know that this case has been set for motions on multiple times. I know that my client lives out of state. He has actually flown in for motions before. We actually had an agreement from the state that this case was going to be disposed of, which I believe maybe it wasn't Mr. Edelman. I thought it was. It might have been the previous individual who handled this case. So I apologize that I thought it was him. But Mr. Spratt also clearly recalls we came in for a motion setting before, and based on what the state said at that hearing, we allowed for I think an agreed reset to the matter. And then when Mr. Edelman is saying that this individual, excuse me, has a 3-week, has had this, either been on vacation for 3 weeks or has had this plan for 3 weeks. And then the state used the excuse last week that, they couldn't subpoena their officer because, of the freeze, or they couldn't get their officer there because they didn't have enough notice. This case has been set. This has been, hanging over Mr. Spratt for years already. And the state still isn't ready because his officer is on a vacation that clearly the state should have known about to give us notice of even last week. So we are absolutely adamantly opposed to yet another continuance.
Any further comments from the state?
On August 31st of 2018, this case was reset from a motion to suppress at the request of the defense. Defense counsel approached for special setting because defendant was in Virginia and didn't know he had to come to the setting. There was a reset in June of 2019 because the attorney at the time had a conflict. Then there was a reset when the defendant was allowed to apply for pretrial diversion. So that's at least 3 resets for the defense's favor. Our request is that in one instance, we were physically incapable of requesting Officer Prescott. And in this instance, Officer Prescott is not available today. He'll be available tomorrow. So we're asking that this case be recalled for tomorrow. And we don't think that's very much to ask, considering the previous request by the defense.
And if I may respond, Your Honor, that request where he says it's being used against the defense, and I think maybe we need to bring in the former prosecutor, that is the meeting that we had when we were all there. And when my client applied for the pretrial diversion, he was told 100% by the DA who he met with. You know, Mr. Spratt is here and can testify to this as well. He met with the DA that day, and I thought it was Mr. Edelman, and it wasn't. I believe it was Anthony. And he was assured we were not going to continue to have to come back to court, that he was going to either be dismissed or he was going to be given pretrial diversion, period, end of story. So we agreed to that reset. We were ready to go that day. The state was not ready to go that day either. So that being used against us now, I have a huge issue with, because he's taking notes he's taking his notes and putting them in front of this court like that was our request, and it was not. That was not for my client to be allowed to do it. It was because instead of us going through a lengthy hearing, the state offered that and assured us that that was going to happen. Now, it didn't happen. So since that time, now here we are yet again. Last week, there's no reason why Mr. Edelman didn't tell us this last week if this officer's been on vacation for 3 weeks. So, and then when he wants to say there was an attorney conflict, I probably was in trial. That also shouldn't be held against my client.
You probably were in trial.
Well, you know, I don't know that. I mean, if I had an attorney conflict, it was either a medical appointment or I was in trial, would be my suspicion.
Okay. Well, Mr. Spratt, are you here in San Antonio?
No, sir, I'm in Virginia.
Okay. That makes it a little easier for me. Before I decide which date, I will reset this. However, Mr. Edelman, as an officer of this court, I want you to look over the actual file, well, your actual file, and meet with Anthony and find out if he, in fact, gave the impression that Ms. Wentland is, if he recalls that or he has that impression, he shares that impression. If that's the case, that might save us all a whole lot of time. Okay?
Your Honor, I'm looking at the state's file now. The entry for September 30th, 2019 only says PTD approved, and it has the signature of Anthony Arnold. Now,
What is that? What was approved?
PTD approved by Anthony Arnold with his signature. And that's all the notation that it has. There are no notes for this case confirming what Ms. Wentland says. And if the court wants, I can see if Mr. Arnold is available and have him log in and recount his recollection of these events,
Well,
to see if they...
Mr. Edelman, doesn't PTD mean pretrial diversion approved?
It does, but the approval by the misdemeanor attorney is just one part of the application process. There is still a review process which can reject someone from PTD, which is why we tell people.
That. I understand that part. Has there been an application for pretrial diversion, Ms. Wentland?
Judge, and actually there was, and actually this was not a standard pretrial diversion offer. This, as the court I'm sure knows, and as Mr. Edelman I'm sure is aware, and as Mr. Arnold is aware, I almost never utilize pretrial diversion, it is a very, very odd thing for me to utilize. We only did it in this case because of the travel circumstances, because of the length of the trial, and because of the representations of Mr. Arnold. And Mr. Spratt certainly can testify, we all met in the back room, across from probation, the conferring room. Mr. Arnold questioned Mr. Spratt because I allowed it to happen in good faith, because I said, you know what, I'm only going to do this if this is a guarantee. If we're going to be, this is going to be a done deal and my client's not going to have to travel here again from Virginia. Now, granted, he's not traveling anymore, but at the time we didn't know that this was going to happen. And so I would be very glad, like when Mr. Edelman says, well, these are the notations, this was not your typical approval. This was the type of approval where I was like, well, what if they reject them? No, we can override that. This is a done deal. And if they don't take him, it was supposed to be an informal, I can't remember what the term was back then, where it was a kind of off the books pretrial diversion done with, and
Conditional?
whatever it was like a pretrial diversion, yes, a conditional pretrial diversion, which Mr. Spratt did the things that were required of his conditional pretrial diversion, which I believe was like, what was it, Mr. Spratt? You took an anger management class?
Anger management course.
Yes, he took an anger management course because he was told, even if they don't accept you, we're going to do a conditional. It's going to be dismissed one way or another. He looked at Mr. Spratt, he looked at me, and now here we are. It's still lingering over his head this long later. You know, I mean, I have no problem with getting Anthony Arnold here. I would love to get him here. I think Mr. Edelman is friends with him. I apologize that I thought it was Mr. Edelman, but you know, for this to continue to be going on, and I think plus we're going to end up in this hearing. And anyway, you know, my client's wife is also a witness, and she's a doctor, and she's going to have to take off work whenever, you know, Mr. Prescott decides to show up. So, I mean, we just are adamantly opposed, and I would like the court to put on record whatever Mr. Arnold has to say about why it's not been dismissed already.
Mr. Edelman.
I've already sent an email to Mr. Arnold asking if he's available to log in. The problem fundamentally is that everything that Ms. Wentland claims does not in any form seem to have been reduced to writing. And so we are at the mercy of our respective memories. And simply because Mr. Arnold made this offer doesn't necessarily mean that it was binding on subsequent prosecutors.
I disagree with that.
That has some significance, and it may well be true, because I've seen it where people say, well, hey, that was a prior order offer. There's nothing here says you took it, and you know, I'm doing different. It's not the normal thing I have seen, but it does happen. That doesn't mean that's the right thing. All right, let's wait for Mr. Arnold and see if he responds. Is he over to jail, or is he somewhere else?
He is assigned to the felony intake division.
Oh, really?
Really?
He just got back from a military stint, didn't he?
Yes, sir. He returned February 10th or thereabouts.
All right. Well, we'll just hang back a little bit. Relax.
Should I go off the record, Judge?
We're off the record right now. Thank you, Kayleen.